Generation 1, 1999 until 2006. Generation 2, 2006 until 2013. Generation 3, 2013 until 2018. And here it is, the fourth generation of the BMW X5. Today on Autogefuehl, your number one resource for in-depth car reviews and your number one community to discuss cars with Thomas. We will take you on a detailed tour of the exterior, the interior, and the driving experience on-road and off-road, here with the most common engine you will probably also buy. And of course talking about the changes to the predecessor generation. All of that in Full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go! You have already seen the changes throughout the generations. This one here has the biggest double kidney ever. Also with those adaptive fins, the inner ones will open when the engine needs more air. And those headlamps are more horizontally drawn. They start with LED from standard equipment, optional adaptive LED for the cornering. Then those ones here are the laser lights. They have the high beam function for about 600 meters range, but in the US it will be half of the range due to regulations. We'll also tell you more about different things which are different in the different markets of the countries. So depending on your regulations, there are a few surprises. 4 meters 92 or 16 foot 1 is the total length of the new generation X5, and it is actually 6 centimeters wider. And here in the length, it's 4 centimeters, so just a little bit longer. So not so many changes. The rims start with 18-inch. Those ones are 21-inch. 22 is the maximum. Then there's a base trim level and the X-Line. This one here is the X-Line. They have those plastic wheel fenders, still the off-road look. We've been off-roading here today already, therefore it's not super clean. I will soon also show you the M Sport. That one then has painted wheel arches and also lower bumper is painted. You will soon be able to compare that. Then more subtle lines. Here's a dropping line dividing in light and shadow. Overall a rather conservative design in the side profile, but they also want to keep the room on the inside, of course. And we recently been there also in Spartanburg. All the BMW X models are built in the US in Spartanburg. Just the X1 is built in Europe. Now looking at the rear, rather an evolutionary step, but those taillights are new, 3-dimensional frame and also horizontally drawn as well. It appears wider, and as I said earlier, it's also 6 centimeters wider overall in the chassis. Then the lower part has this contrast lower bumper and those fake exhaust tips around it. The 40i exhaust. 40i will be the most common engine. And since we're at the rear, let's talk about the rear axle steering. An optional feature where the rear axle goes. The tire is 3 degrees across at slow speeds, reducing the turning circle by 1 meter, or when you go at higher speeds, it goes in a parallel direction, the same one as the front wheels, giving you a little bit more smooth stability at higher speeds. And let me talk about the suspension choices. You start with a base suspension, base steel suspension. Then you can go for the air suspension, which we have today. You can put it up and down a little bit depending on the speed. 8 centimeters is the difference then from the top to the bottom part. And then there's an adaptive M suspension, so there's not an air suspension, but an adaptive one that goes, in a wider span between sportiness and comfort. But in general, this is definitely the sporty choice. So if you want the most comfort, you go here for the air suspension. If you want the sportiest ride, you go for the Adaptive M suspension, because that one then is also now available in a package with the anti-tilting function. So that when the car goes in the corner, the G-force are basically evened out because suspension is working against it and therefore, staying more even as it is. BMW says they did not offer the anti-tilting function as other manufacturers do, together with the air suspension, because they think that people either want to go the sporty ride or the very comfortable ride with the air suspension, and then also won't care so much about the tilting effect. Definitely a different strategy than the other manufacturers. And this is how the new X5 looks in white, with black rims and off-road tires. Those black rims, by the way, also 20-inch. And to show you an individual color, this one here is beige, but the reason I'm showing you this vehicle is not only because of the color. This one here is the M Sport. So this trim line here, you can see, has those painted wheel arches in contrast to the plastic wheel arches we've seen with the X-Line, or which we have also in the base trim level. And if I would buy an SUV, I would always like to have this SUV look, because in that way, I'm not really sure, not my favorite. But what about you? Would you pick rather this one here or the classic SUV crossover wheel arches? And we can also see the 22-inch rims. Those ones are, it's the maximum size that is available. Engines, no 4-cylinder whatsoever. So for the diesel side, you have a 3-liter 6-cylinder, either with 265 or 400 horsepower. The latter one then in the M50D. Or today, this engine will be the worldwide bestseller. This is the 3-liter 6-cylinder turbo petrol engine. In this case here with 340 horsepower. And then there's also, not in Europe, not in Germany, but in the US, for example, there will be the 4.4-liter V8, the strongest one. This one then with 462 horsepower. And the acceleration figures for this one here, 5.5 seconds to 100 kilometers or 62 miles an hour. And then there will be this one, the 45e. This one will be the plug-in hybrid coming up soon. Not yet available for driving, but we'll keep you updated on that. You can charge here on this side with a plug then later on. And this one here will be based on the 3-liter 6-cylinder petrol engine, here then with a total system output of 394 horsepower and 5.7 seconds to 100 kilometers or 62 miles an hour. And BMW promises, the final figures we will reveal later, it has supposed to be like something about 80 kilometers of full electric range. Will this really be true? We will find out for you as soon as possible. This is the car key, silver elements, here to open the hatch, close it and open it, or with the keyless entry. Strangely, it's not that you close it while holding your hand here, you have to put your finger here to close it in this area, and then to open it as usual right there. And we also have a soft close right there, you can show it right there. Magic. But again, it's an extra. The question is if you really need it. Then on the inside of the doors we have sensor tech, that's leather red. Also with some, this is the Hofmeisterknick, the design. Been famous with the BMW 3 Series. Also you can transport over to the interior of the car. Then also matte wood is available, but also some aluminum structure just as you like it for the inside of the door. You can also fit bigger bottles right there, that's good. Then the new interior right there. Soon we'll tell you everything about the screens, but you can already see that those are digital. There are two different steering wheels available, a normal comfortable one and the sport steering wheel. This one is the normal comfort steering wheel. Then there are also two different seat forms. There's a comfort seat and there's also a sports seat. So two seat forms, and they both start with a sensor tech surface in black or beige worldwide, also in Europe. And this one here and then is the optional animal skin surface for extra money. But the Sensatec is very popular in the US, especially, for example. You can also move up those head restraints electronically. Again, you know, if you want to adjust the seat even more, those are all costly extras. That's the downside with a lot of those premium vehicles. Also here, for example, to put the front part of the seat back again. In some cars it's manual. Here everything is electrical. But again, you know, when you think about the starting price, you won't end up with the normal starting price for sure. Getting inside is super easy, as we're used to from those SUVs, and you have an upright seating position. It is of course somewhat similar as in the predecessor generation, maybe a little bit more roomish. So you have the panoramic roof right there inbuilt, the standard in the US. Still have some headroom left, as I have the seat in the lowest position. The moment is 86 or 6'1". So in some markets you'll also be able to go without the panoramic roof, and then you also have a little bit more headroom. The steering wheel can be electronically adjusted in reach and height. That's good, and overall those are really comfortable seats. It's a really good seating position, and you feel like king of the road. This is what the full-size SUV does. So this is the interior overview. You can see the biggest changes for sure that you have those two 12.3-inch screens, left and right, both the same size, although they look quite different. It is very well integrated now. It stands out, of course, a little bit that you can better see it. Then very flat surfaces all around here that don't stick out too much. Again, here matte wood is being used. So you can hear how, let's say, natural and rough it feels, but really cool, definitely. Then you can see this a small black screen. When I soon turn on the engine, then you will also see the climate unit right there, because that's all built right in there. So I don't only trust on the touch screens, there are still some manual buttons left, also for the volume, for example. Here we go with the AC, so I even don't have to turn on the engine for that. So we can change the vent strength, for example, right here, then the temperature on the left side. So the screen, it can be controlled with touch. Let's go back to the home screen first. There we go. For example, the GPS looks quite cool, but you can still use this lower turning knob as you are used to. This lower area has also been redesigned. It is also available with a classic gear shifter. This one here is the crystal package with this glass work shifting lever, but you could also get another one. And a lot of hotkey buttons in the lower part. This can be a little bit confusing. Lower part for the driving modes. Good that you have a separate button for the camera, however. That comes quite handy, that you can always access the camera when you press it. Although obviously not when the engine is not running. It would have been cool if they would have introduced that. Then of course some hotkeys still for accessing the map or then the home screen again, as I just did earlier. And the steering wheel, here again the comfort steering wheel, there's also sport available with heated function for winter times. Right side to browse, for example, the radio, also for the head-up display. Left side for the ACC, and also shifting pedals for this automatic transmission. And when I press this voice activation button at the steering wheel, I can, for example, say set temperature to 75 degrees.
I'm setting the temperature at the driver's side at 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
So that worked. Also an easy way to do it while driving, for example. By the way, if the key is not found by the car, put it right here. There's also a symbol that's right next to the steering column. Then the car does detect the key, because at some point we had the problem that the car wasn't detecting the key in the middle console and didn't start. But when you put it here once, just hold it once, then you can always start the car. Those are the digital instruments. You can see on the left side we have the speedometer, on the right side the RPM going counterclockwise. I'm not so sure what I think about that seeing in the BMW. The reason for that they did that is that it's room saving. You know, they save space to do it that way. So in the middle part, you will then, for example, be able to see the GPS or something. And here on the right side, you also can switch around what you want to see. And we also have a head-up display. At the moment, it looks quite small, but when you have a map assigned, for example, a route guidance, that will be way bigger, and you can also see the GPS map, a part of it, in the head-up display. So one more close-up at the infotainment unit. By the way, it's fully flicker-free on real life for the eyes. Again, with a good processor, it goes quite fast to zoom in and out. That's no problem. Again, you can also use the touchscreen, but then again, you have the possibility to use the touchscreen or the lower button. You connect your phone via Bluetooth, that's possible, or wireless CarPlay is available, but just CarPlay, not Android Auto. BMW says that they are not satisfied with the way that Google or Android treats data. So they only collaborate with Apple. That's what they're saying. And here in the settings, by the way, this is very interesting, I think, for the driver assistance system. I deactivate the steering intervention. Why? I will tell you in the driving part. So a lot to control here, and also with a interesting visualization right there. Here also in blue, as the car really is. So now I have activated the engine, and there you can see the camera view. It's a very wide view. This is, by the way, the front camera at the moment. And when I put it to the rear, you can see here this in the rear view camera, together with the drone view from above. That's quite interesting. And I can also pick the different sides here, for example, to check out what's going on right there, that I don't damage those rims. Again, this big surface of the matte wood, and you can open it. However, this opening and closing mechanism is... I'm not a fan of it. It's somehow strange, like when you put it back. I'm not so sure about that. But then below that, we have several options. You have now a new option of cooled and heated cup holders, like we know from a Mercedes GLE or GLS. Here is a normal USB port. All over the place we'll have the USB-C ports. And then you can also have a smartphone, inductive smartphone charger right there in the front. Oh, Schmoozy is loading up. And this works, of course, with all smartphones that can support the inductive charging. With the opening of the car with NFC, by the way, they do not offer that for the iPhone, not for Apple products, just for Samsung Galaxy 7 or above that. If you want to do that with the iPhone, you have to have those, like a holder where you put a key card in. Then you can also use it. The advantage is then you can put out the key card and use it for valet parking or something, that you don't have to hand your smartphone over. I'm more a classic key fob guy to open and close the car. Or what do you think about opening or closing a car with the smartphone? This is the middle armrest. You can have, for example, also smartphone storage in there, then with the USB-C charger. Just wireless CarPlay is available, by the way. If you want to plug in your phone with the cable to CarPlay, won't work, just wireless over Bluetooth protocol. And also interesting, now with the smartphone, you can now have over-the-air updates for the software of the car, but you have to use your smartphone. So make a hotspot then for the connection between the car and the smartphone, then the smartphone gets the updates. And we have this panoramic roof with a black shade, and it really goes all over the vehicle, so especially the rear passengers will enjoy this view. You can also open it. It's not only a panoramic roof. Here we go. The front part does open, then you can leave some fresh air in. And let's get in the rear. Well, you see the door doesn't open too wide, so that can be a little bit problematic if you want to install child seats. Then, I mean, this is the seat as I would be driving. Yes, those are very comfortable, also very thick seats, so this is hardly any legroom left. That's very negatively surprising. Also considering the car has gone a little bit longer and should also have increased legroom. I mean, I do fit here as a tall adult, so you can drive with 4 tall adults, no problem. But still, there should be more knee room considering the length of the vehicle. Or what do you think? Headroom-wise, although we have the panoramic roof, still some clearance there. But again, also, for the size of the car, I have experienced a lot of other cars which have more headroom. Here, by the way, this is some special hanger, so you can put here, for example, your jacket over there and just store it a little bit more space consuming. but you can also easily remove it if, you know, I mean, this can't be so good for crash safety. So if someone sits here in the rear, definitely always remove it. This is more, you know, when you're like on your business trips or something and really need your stuff, you know, that you don't want to flat iron them all over the place. And another USB-C port we have here too. And just those simple shades for the rear. Always good to have them, especially when you have kids in the back and maybe want to sleep or something. Isofix at the outside parts of the seats. And then we have some cup holders right there, together with some more storage area. Yeah, here we go. And on the other side, we have another hanger possibility. You can also remove that, so you can put a bag here or something. And finally, we also have a separate climate unit for the rear passengers. So now it gets really interesting. I can open this trunk in 4 different ways. From the inside of the door, from the driver's cabin, I could press the button here at the key fob. I could open it right here, and I could use this foot kicking mechanism. And in 3 ways, it opens like this, in this split way. This lower part here, I can also, you know, just take a seat and have a picnic or something. This is a special mechanism. We know it also from the Range Rover. I mean, it's quite cool to have, and you can load in things and out quite easily. This one here is the manual cover for the trunk. This one here is the 645-liter setup. And if I flip the seats, so in this way you have the maximum setup of 1,860 liters, and that looks quite good. However, what about this cover? Yes, it's the base manual one, but you can also get a new feature where this one then is electrically folded down into the floor bottom. Brian has that one in his static review of the X5. You can check that out as well. We will link it in the video description. And this one here is the normal boot floor. So just fabric, but there's also a special version with rubber pads available, and when you drive they come up a little bit, and so they secure your luggage. Also, you can see that with Brian's static review. Then you can put up this lower floor part, and there are hydraulic struts that you can store some stuff underneath, or then also optionally get a replacement tire. So I can also put this one up here electronically again, and when I push this button here, as soon as I open it again, then the car moves down with the air suspension for easier loading. And let's check this. Child safety. Yeah, that's decent. That's totally okay. Wasn't the case recently with the Audi e-tron, for example. So, and now, the last thing I want to show you. As you might remember, 3 ways. Foot kick opening mechanism, key fob, inside of the door, they always open everything. But when I use this one here manual, basically, manual electric, so to say, then you see only the top part opens. Maybe if you just, you know, want to grab something and put it in very quickly without really moving heavier things in and out. Welcome to Thomas's Driving Lounge with the BMW X5. We'll start in small town America, and later on we'll head on to a little higher speed, and also we'll soon have an off-road driving part for you as well. So we'll cover all the different situations which you might come across as a customer or just as a fan for watching and enjoying, of course. So the new BMW X5, if you compare it to the previous generation, it still feels like an X5. So if you're an existing X5 customer, which is actually, you know, the biggest buyer group always, then you still feel at home, and it's not a completely different vehicle. The first thing you notice.
In a quarter of a mile, turn left at the end of the road onto Atlanta.
Let's see if we can turn down that voice guidance. There it is. It's always good to test, you know, live testing. Oh, we forgot that, and directly you can just press it right there. By the way, it's flickering just on camera here again, especially the small action cam doesn't really like those screens, so we'll turn it dark. I think that looks better. Yeah. So it's also another contrasting view which is possible, that you have it, you know, with a dark background and then with a wide road. So it's, you know, quite interesting to see that you have those alternatives. This one will be good when driving at night, for example, then you're not blinded so much. And well, I've driven some highway stuff earlier, and you know, just cruise control on long-term run, because I want to see what decent mileage could I possibly get with this 3-liter turbo petrol engine when you're driving really steady and, you know, rolling or being in traffic a little bit, not really forcing the issue. And that is about 29 mpg, so that would be 28, 29 mpg, something like that. That would be 9 liters on 100 kilometers. Overall, considering the size of the vehicle, this is quite decent, because some mid-size sedans or compact sedans with petrol engines consume that kind of fuel. Of course, if you hammer the throttle a little bit more or have some off-road situations, the consumption will go up. So here at the moment, the road is not that good, but we have the air suspension that is evening out the bumps very well. Overall, the sound insulation has been improved a lot. This one is, to me, one of the biggest differences to the predecessor so far. It's a super silent ride, and I can recommend the air suspension. I feel that it's not really that soft, so if you compare it to other air suspension, they still remain with a sporty setup. You know, actually, when I want an air suspension, I would like it a little bit softer, but that's of course a matter of preference. If you want the sportiest ride in this car, you have to go for the adaptive M suspension. Then you'll have the stiffest ride if you pick the sports mode. You can also go then with normal or the comfort mode, and then it also will be softer because, as I said, it is an adaptive suspension. And of course, I always tend to say it's never bad to buy the base version of the vehicle, because also the base BMW suspensions are really very good. So the driving feel and suspensions, that's what BMW does best. They've done things they don't do that well maybe than others, but driving wise, driving fun and suspensions, that's where they're really king of the game. And so you'll also be just fine with the base version. The German entry price, by the way, in US price will be similar, just above 60,000 euros or dollars then. And if you pick, for example, you know, a bigger engine or some extras, you can easily climb up over 100k. That's really expensive, but it's not really different if we think about an Audi Q7 or a Mercedes GLE or the Lexus RX. They are all very, very expensive. It's always the question if it pays off. That's also a reason I tend to say, you know, you don't have to have everything, you know, extra. We are of course showing you a lot of extras they have. Overall, they made some more stuff, standard equipment, but then also went up in the price a little bit. For example, we can also use the seat massage while driving, so that works pretty well with this comfort seats. As I said earlier, those ones are the comfort seats. We could not show you the sport seats yet. I hope at a later stage we'll be able to show you a sport seat, and maybe also one with sensor tech, with the more sustainable material, that you also, you know, have some variety in what we could actually show you. And of course, later on in driving experience, we will, you know, at a later stage, hopefully show you the plug-in hybrid. Today, the normal petrol engine, this one here, the 40i, will be the engine to go for globally. So most people will drive with this engine, and it is really a superb one because it's very silent when you just let it roll. It feels really sophisticated and evolved. So you always have enough torque left, no matter in which situation you are, even if you leave it in a normal driving mode. And at the same time, you really have an explosive acceleration if you want it. For example, you could go down, you know, shift some gears down with the shifting pedals, and then it comes a little bit faster. But in the normal driving modes, it will rather be a comfortable and relaxing ride. So there's also the Eco Pro mode, for example, and if you are in the Eco Pro mode, there we are, then the instrument cluster also changes. So I have big consumption meter then, so I can more take a look at that and try to tune it a little bit. The throttle input is decreased, so that's all fuel optimized. And the different thing is then the sport mode, everything turns red and sporty, and then I have more punch in the throttle, so when I just push a little bit, it gets more drive. Also the sound experience changes a little bit. Steering wise, yeah, it's a little bit stiffer than in the steering. So if I'm in the comfort mode, it's a little bit easier to steer actually, and that's good for parking in and out and stuff. But overall, that's what they always usually have. They still remain with a very natural driving feel, so a natural way of steering. The only thing I'm not quite keen of is the lane keeping system, the active lane keeping system. So I have actually deactivated it because there were situations where when I had it activated and you maybe like I get a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, just like this, and it would be no problem. I could, drive further in a smooth way. But then suddenly it's like, meow, it drives you back to the middle in such a harsh way that I was really shocked, and I was thinking like, oh wow, that's pretty weird. So I think the active lane keeping system is overreacting in this vehicle. And we had similar stuff with Mercedes as well, with the new systems. This one here overreacts in the steering. Those Mercedes systems, they tend to keep you in the lane then with, with braking at the individual wheels, and that is also pretty weird. The good thing now with my Mercedes is, at the left side of the steering wheel you can always deactivate it, press the button. Here you really have to go in the menu, and I don't want to do that while driving really. So that's why I showed you that earlier in the GPS menu, how to do that. So, and I left it deactivated now. So other than that, what is really cool is when you have the active cruise control or adaptive cruise control. That one works pretty well. So you activate it here at the middle button, then you set it to the speed limit here, for example, now 30 mph. Do not pass. I just need the wizard stick now. So set it, and then you don't have to care about the speed. And distance to the car in front of you is also being kept. It's quite comfortable. And the funny thing is that when you have this mode activated and the active steering is also activated, so you basically can just rest your hands on here. It also only works at higher speeds. I tried it earlier on the highway. That system works pretty flawless, and it keeps the car in the center of the lane in a very smooth way and always centered, and this is so relaxing when you're stuck in traffic. Really cool system, and I wonder why this one works so smooth, like with keeping the lane, but the emergency lane keeping is, someone too reactive. I mean, it's maybe different philosophy, and it should only be for emergency situations, but somehow the car thinks that those emergency situations would be, would occur earlier than they actually do. So definitely interesting to have them. So we also have the blind spot monitor. That's definitely the option you should check. We have those triangles in the side mirrors. At the moment there's no one overtaking us because we are on those rather rural roads. But that's definitely a very interesting thing. The air suspension here again, if you have some bumps in the road, again I would expect it to be a little bit softer. It's still a very good suspension. Okay. But if I think about, for example, driving in the BMW 5 Series, I mean, those are related cars, but I've driven the adaptive suspension in the BMW 5 Series, and I felt it was softer than the air suspension used here in this car. I don't know. Strange one. Other than that, you have a good control feeling of the car. It doesn't feel as big as it is. It is very well to control, easy to steer, and again, you still have the possibility to drive in a sporty way, always. That's what BMW is also promising. That's why people go for that brand. Let's go to the sport mode once again. So there we are. Always nice with those visualizations. Maybe they can be a little bit distracting, maybe, but pretty cool for sure. So last time I was here with BMW and I did some slalom on the road, just a little bit, but keeping in my lane. We got some of you telling me like, probably you shouldn't do that in the US. The police does not really like that. And I mean, police doesn't like that anywhere, I think. But I mean, if they're a little bit stricter here with that, probably I leave it as it is. Now the speed limit goes up a little bit, so we're at 45. And then we could also, you know, let's drop behind and get you some acceleration there. Maybe even from a standstill when we get a little bit less crowded area here. So that will be very interesting. This updated head-up display is really pleasing. So all the time I'm seeing everything in my line of sight, like the speed I'm driving, the speed that is allowed. Also the GPS, I don't have it, you know, I have the map mounted here now. There are some commands right there, but also I can see the GPS there. So pretty cool for that. So now I'm sport, I do some acceleration. All co-drivers hold tight. Let's see, let that Dodge pickup pass. Let's see also what happens when I push the brakes and hit the pedal to the metal. If we get some kind of launch control or something. So, and here we go. We can accelerate to 45 mph. That was already 52. So pretty quick. And since the all-wheel drive also has a smooth distribution, it feels kind of good and also, let's say, equalized. It's not that you get this massive push from the rear or you're being pulled from the front extremely. It always remains with a rear wheel bias, that all-wheel drive, but also gives you some more torque on the front wheels. So we have a very good acceleration, then very quick, but at the same time also good to bear. You know, if you're thinking of the gravitational forces that are being applied to you. So that's pretty cool. And you see this engine does a lot of things right. You have enough power. The mileage is still quite okay. And nice sound also while accelerating. At the same time, silent when you want it to be silent. And now, some highway driving. Really decent sound. So because when we drive a little bit faster, we can also tell you more about the sound insulation once more and about those assistance systems on the highway. So here we go. It's always irritating for me, by the way, when I drive in the US with a US spec vehicle, that the side mirrors are zoomed in. That's pretty irritating. I more prefer the normal mirror as we have it in Europe. So here now we are at 70 mph. So remember 60 miles or 62 miles an hour is 100 kilometers. So 70 mph would be something like 110, 115 kilometers, something like that. I mean, it's the usual highway speed in most of the countries, maybe a little bit faster. And you see, I don't have to raise my voice that much. It's still pretty silent, even if a truck is overtaking me now. So that's a very comfortable ride. Now I can activate again the cruise control. Set it here at the steering wheel. Here you can also see those yellow triangles. They are yellow, by the way, not red. So yellow triangles when something would be appearing in the blind spot. So let me just move over that it appears for you. Now the next guy moved over. I mean, we have 4 lanes here, pretty luxurious. So here we have some Chevrolet Cruze or something coming. The small one. How was it called? The small one. There it is, the yellow triangle. Here we go. Spark. The Cruise is the bigger one, right? So, and now I also have this green steering wheel in the head-up display, and that means that this active steering is activated. So theoretically, the car would drive itself now. Yeah, but that's not allowed. So I have to keep my hands on the steering wheel. But just to show you that, when I'm not really forcing the steering wheel somewhere, and we are in the left corner now, and so it's really gradually adjusting everything. And of course, very soon the car will stop. It's like, yeah, Thomas, take your hands on the steering wheel, don't do anything. So there it is, the yellow steering wheel, and then I have to take my hands on the steering wheel again, or the system would deactivate. So, and this active lane keeping system, when you set it yourself with the cruise control, works very, very well. And you can so much relax with that one. So yes, you still check the traffic and stuff, still have your hands on the steering wheel, but you can just relax more, you don't have to react on everything. So, that's really cool. By the way, you maybe have seen this black unit there in the instrument. That's actually a camera, and this goes even further, because in the US and in China it is allowed that this car drives really autonomously in traffic jam situations. And then the camera is checking basically that you still look to the front to check the traffic, because you have to do that so that like texting, smartphone, looking to the right, chatting with the co-driver or something. That's really interesting. And this traffic situation, and the same goes for the lane changing, because when you hear, for example, when you hold this turning indicator, I did not change this, I did not steer actually now, that was the car. So there's this automatic semi-piloting lane changing. It's not when you put it all the way through, when you hold the turning indicator. And this is also the second thing that is just allowed in the US and China. And you might wonder now, wait a minute, Thomas showed me that in the Mercedes E-Class, for example, with lane change, and also like in the Volvo or with the Mercedes, showed me that actually that the turning indicator also works, again, by the way. But why now just in the US and in China? Well, there has been a change in regulations, and in the EU it was basically made stricter to use those systems. That's really strange, because you would think that regulations more go in an autonomous driving way, but there also seem to be some drawbacks. And so every country has its own regulations. Like, for example, in Europe you can get the 600 meter range for the laser light. In the US only 300 meters is allowed. And I think recently I also talked to Audi engineers who told me, oh, there's some tire relish on the ground there. So they told me that the matrix LED would also not be allowed in the US. So, really different regulations, apart from those standard things like this US spec car has those yellow reflectors at the front, left and the right, which we don't have in EU, for example. But those are really minor differences. But I think on technology scale, maybe there should also be the countries maybe talking to each other and say, let's do some regulations together. That would come handy for customers for sure. So again, great highway car, sit upright, very comfortable. Those seats are great from the structure. Of course, again, I have the problem that with this surface you sweat a lot. Unfortunately, they put the fabric seats out of the program. In US, it wasn't available before anyway, I think, but in Europe they were available. I would tend to buy those, but then again, if they are not available, I would go with a Sensatec. I'm not sure if they're also available together with the ventilated seat function. We'll have to check the price list for that later on. Those are very specific details for sure. But other than that, the car makers try to make the car more identical now for the markets and don't try to mix up the trims too much. So that's also a trend, While regulations are still somewhat different, the car makers, or for example Ford made this so-called One Ford strategy. This is also one example for the manufacturers going, apart from those differences. Because, best example, US viewers here in Autogefuehl see a Passat B8, like the recent iteration in Europe, and say like, why the hell do we get the Passat B7, the previous generation, that just facelifted? Why is that? And, you know, are we fools or something? So, this is a globalized automotive reporting world, and so car manufacturers also have to make their models globalized, because everyone wants to have the same, you know, when they see them somewhere on the internet, on Autogefuehl. So again, I mean, the road surface is quite rough, but still the car does a great job in riding very smooth and silent. And also when you do more sudden lane changes, although we have the air suspension, did you see that? There was hardly any tilting. And maybe that's also a reason that they didn't put the anti-tilting function right here in this one with the air suspension, because it's still also sporty enough. And now to our off-road driving part for today. We start with just a short descent, and I don't need the hill descent control for that, but there's one available. You can activate it also, and then you can even adjust the speed. It starts with about 2 mph, and then you can also adjust the speed with the cruise control lever. So a lot of vehicles that have been coming out recently, they have reduced their off-road capabilities because customers don't really want it, they don't pick it. Recently the Volkswagen not the Tiguan, the Touareg, they removed the terrain tech package because they said it had a take rate of 1% and no one really took it. But BMW said, you know, also with our US customer focus, where there's more off-road driving, for example, we want to increase the off-road capabilities. So we have this Bose axle air suspension now, and the height difference, as I said earlier, also is about 8 centimeters. Now we already lifted up the car all the way. We also put in the X Rocks mode. So this is a special off-road mode that is adjusting the electronic parameters for this off-road driving. The different off-road modes also available depending on the surface you're on. And I also have the DSC off, so I have some wheel spin possible when, for example, you know, I need some wheel spin to get further. So this is of course soft off-road so far. We'll also face some more obstacles very soon. And I think the most important aspect here is for sure the air suspension with more ground clearance. When you have the off-road package, you can not only have this height adjuster, but also the off-road drive selector and also the underbody cover. So this is very important because, you know, maybe also see that on camera when there's something on the ground that might be damaging the car from below. It's definitely safe to have that. And I mean, if you're somewhere where you have a off-road-ish driveway, this might be important for you. So I always keep my thumbs on the steering wheel when driving off-road, because, you know, at some point the steering wheel might move itself pretty quickly. So I don't intend to dislocate my thumb just yet. So that's safer to do so. And since you have the air suspension, it's also a rather comfortable off-road drive. It's of course not the softest off-road drive, so you feel that this car has an air suspension which also supposed to work on road very well. And I mean, that's also a good focus, you know. So they do not build an off-road car primarily. The primary use is on the road, and then the secondary use is off the road. So I think it's also a good emphasis that maybe off-road the air suspension is a little bit rougher than with some of the very, very true off-road vehicles. So that's absolutely fine. Now I'll put in the hill descent control right at the middle console, and that means I really have to trust in the vehicle now. So when I let go of the brakes, I really let go of the brakes, and now the car decelerates as if I would be on the brakes, but yeah, I'm doing nothing with the right foot, and the speed remains at 2 miles per hour. So it's just, you know, also just a couple of kilometers, and it's good to do it slow and steady. And the good thing is that, you know, the car really knows then how to apply the brakes. They just in the right moment, and maybe not too hard, but also not too, you know, not too lazy, so to say. You can then again, if you have slower downhill, you can also increase the speed, as I said, with the ACC. And now we're going uphill, and for that we can pick the camera system here. So now there's the front view camera. It's really good to have that one, because right now I can still see, but then the steeper it gets, now I don't see what's on the ground, and if there would be maybe like a big stone or something, now I have to apply some more throttle. Steady uphill. So don't accelerate it by just hammering the throttle, because you might just get wheel spin then, but you need a certain amount that the car gets going. Of course, the individual wheel is also adjusted then. So with nowadays off-road cars, it's really cool because they are so capable that you don't have to be a super experienced off-road driver to do it yourself. So you also hear the PDC a little bit because the next trees so are quite close by. And well, considering it's a really huge car, it's actually quite versatile and agile here around those very narrow wood corners. I feel that the wheels are sliding just a little bit, but the car gives me a very controlled and good feeling. And now, for example, you can see it again in the camera that I don't hit the tree going over the next roots. Right there. But this car does not have the rear axle steering, since it's not so important for the US market. And this is basically a US spec vehicle, and you can of course order it. It might also make sense off-road, but of course more if you are in narrow cities and stuff and need some small turning circuits and so. But just to give you the information that this vehicle is not equipped with it. So the air suspension again gives me good comfort here still while driving off-road. So if there's a fierce bump, it doesn't go through to my lower back all the time. And this is of course very important to keep it safe and comfortable off-road driving. So the front camera is also adjusting all the time, that you can see it. You also have this top view from above. You can zoom in, for example, to special cameras to the sides. So you're all safe with that too. So now steady applying the throttle again to get this uphill. And indeed, I have to say, if you also compare it to the previous generation, it's way easier to drive off-road. And one more downhill together with a sand passage. And that's especially tricky because when it gets slick, you can also see it in the car in front of us, the white one. So when it gets slick on the downhill, this is where it gets really tricky. And what I have felt so far with my off-road experience here is that the car is really very smooth in all the electronic support it gives you. So here, for example, I did not use the brakes at all. The car detected what's underneath me and feels what the individual tires are actually doing. And so you can just take a leap of trust and just leave the brakes, and then the car does it for you. So, I think what they have achieved is that all those electronic support, is not only managing that you get through the obstacles, but also if I compare it with some of the other off-road vehicles I've driven, again, the transitions, between the regulations of the stability controls and the individual braking of the tires is really smooth. And this also calms you down a little bit when you're driving off-road. So I can again trust on the camera system here in the front, that I can see the track. Also have to watch out that I don't hit the trees with my side mirrors. So, and uphill again, steady on the throttle. So, theoretically we could also be standing still and start again. The car would be capable of doing that. And of course, the harder the off-road terrain gets, it's always good to keep going, especially when you're uphill, just keep going a little bit with steady speed. So here we go. Still have the hill descent control activated. Now I can apply a throttle a little bit, that we go a little bit faster. Now some rocks underneath, and So we now switch back to from a camera system to the X off-road view. So I can, for example, see steepness of the angles. It's also interesting just to look at it, for example, also as a co-driver. So pretty entertaining as well. So what about this generation, the fourth generation of the X5? The exterior, for sure, a very strong one, the strongest one so far, but surely also an evolution. The interior, more refined, they stepped up the game in the build quality, that's really great. You have a lot of very smooth solutions. Then also more digitalized, that's for sure, but in some cases also quite complicated when you think about the infotainment system software. Also, I find it a little disturbing that the rear legroom is not sufficient for the size of that vehicle. Still, it's possible to drive there with good comfort with 4 adults. And, well, driving is the specialty of a BMW, and that also accounts for the X5. It drives so well. Today here with the air suspension, a smooth ride, but not as smooth as you would, for example, have it with, like a Mercedes GLE or Volkswagen Touareg. They are more in a soft way. Here you still have an air suspension, which still can be driven in a sporty way. That's the strategy that BMW follows. And if you want it even sportier, then you would go with the adaptive M suspension. Definitely this generation is so super silent in the ride. A very surprisingly silent ride. And of course you are like a king of the road, the full-size SUV feeling. And if you have this rear axle steering optional, then you can also reduce the turning circle, for example, to make it a little bit more agile. And there will also be some cool functions Brian showed you in his review already, the static review, where you can, for example, fold back the rear floor, the back cover for the trunk. So cool solutions they have invented there to make it even more flexible for that. Of course, we would like to have your opinion here on our channel. Share your voice in the comments.